barring a character scandal, there's nothing going to come out where those guys are going to fall out of the first round. Either that or some kind of freak injury from now until the draft. I think that there's a very real possibility that the Richardson hype is a lot of smoke. We saw it last year with Malik Willis. So if I was forced to take one or the other, it's very likely that you're going to push on 4. But I would take the under if I was forced to take a bet.
I think this quarterback class is highly overrated. I'm not seeing it. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Dan with FFB from the 50. Again, I've got Patrick with me. In our previous 2 videos, we've broken down the first half of the first round of the draft and the second half. Well, that sounds wordy, but it's
a little
right.
bit.
It's right though. First half of the first round.
Yeah.
Second half of the first round.
Yeah.
Anyways, 2 videos breaking down what we foresee happening, or what at least we're hoping will happen in the first round of the NFL draft. Now we're going to go position by position. And in each one of these positions, I want to start by talking a little bit of sports betting with you.
Yeah.
Because I'm not good at it. I know my limitations. You are good at it. I want to know what you know so that I can make some money too.
Okay.
All right. So the first position we're going to talk about is quarterback. And we're going to start each one of these with an over-under.
Okay.
All right. So we're going to talk about how many of these guys are going to be taken in the first round of the draft. And I've set the over-under at quarterback at 4. And I know that's low-hanging fruit. I mean, we have the Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Will Levis. We've got Anthony Richardson, so I know low-hanging fruit. I'm going to put it at 4. I'm going to say in this case you're not allowed to push.
Okay.
You have to choose one or the other.
Okay.
And then I want you to tell me why. And you can do that as a part of the, this is why I'm doing it. Or we can break it down each player at a time and say, okay, now we get down to this 5th guy. This is why I think I took the over. This is why I think I took the under, because I don't think this guy's going to go in the first round.
Okay, so the way I look at the quarterback class is Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud. Those guys are rock solid. Barring a character scandal, there's nothing going to come out where those guys are going to fall out of the first round. Either that or some kind of freak injury from now until the draft. Those guys are in. The reality is Anthony Richardson, Will Levis, and Hendon Hooker, which is theoretically the 5th quarterback in this class, all have a great deal of volatility. Now, the experts have kind of coalesced around the idea that Levis more likely than Richardson, but Richardson as well, both likely to be top half the first round quarterbacks. They've got the skill, they've got the potential being the key word with those 2 especially, that they're almost certainly going to be first round players. Hendon Hooker and Aiden O'Connell, you could see some outcomes where teams see something that they might jump back into that first round and grab their guy. Me personally, as a Colts fan, I really like the potential for maybe trading back up into the first round and grabbing Hooker if you don't take a quarterback with that first pick. If I were to take this over-under at 4, obviously the prices would matter in all of this. I think that there's a very real possibility that the Richardson hype is a lot of smoke. We saw it last year with Malik Willis. Anthony Richardson is a very inconsistent quarterback. Yes, he's got the tools. Yes, he's going to jump off the screen. He's going to run a 4.4 40, which he did this afternoon. He's going to set the record, which he did again this afternoon on the vertical leap for quarterbacks. He is a freak of nature. He's also extremely raw. So if I was forced to take one or the other, it's very likely that you're going to push on 4. But I would take the under if I was forced to take a bet. I think there's a very real possibility that Richardson falls, and I don't think Hooker, because he's 25, because he's coming off some injury concerns, that I don't think he'll end up in the first round. I think it's unlikely that he will. The fact that he's 25 is a very real concern. I remember people might remember Brandon Weeden when he was drafted by the Browns a few years ago.
Right.
He was 27, and that was just crazy. Well, 25 is very old for a quarterback. Aiden O'Connell's a nice player, but I don't think a quarterback that largely has mobility issues is likely to get pushed up the boards, to get pushed into that first round. So I think it's more likely you see 3 than 5.
You know, and I'm glad you said that, because I really do want to talk about this quarterback class. And, excuse me, as a Bears fan who have the first overall pick, I want this quarterback class to be strong because we don't need one. and that raises the value of that first overall pick. I'm not seeing it. I'm not. And, we've talked off camera. I think this quarterback class is highly overrated. I'm not seeing it. I've got concerns with every one of these guys. So I'm going to tell you my concerns. I want you to tell me if you think I'm right or if you think I'm off my rocker. And I'm going to start with Bryce Young. All right, so his measurables came in. He is 5'10" and 1/8 inch, which we've seen quarterbacks. Kyler Murray, I'll use him as an example. Smaller quarterbacks do okay. He's no Kyler Murray. He's not mobile. He's a pocket quarterback.
Yeah.
He did tip the scale at 204. He drank a lot of water, a lot of milk, and as you said, ate a lot of pasta leading up to this.
Most certainly.
He's not a 204-pounder. A guy his size cannot be a pocket passer in the NFL.
Well, not for long. So. Not for long. He's obviously has a lot of the raw tools outside of his height. But at the end of the day, when you look at the statistics, quarterback injuries come from the pocket. A lot of people think that running quarterbacks are much more highly susceptible to get hurt because they're getting out on the perimeter and they get hit by linebackers or safeties or edge rushers or whatever it may be, and that's where injuries come from. The NFL's looked at this. The data is quite clear. The vast majority of the injuries come from inside the pocket, and that's just because there's more bodies, and you're not just getting hit by defensive linemen and linebackers and safeties in the backfield. Your offensive linemen step on you. You're throwing a pass and your thumb hits one of your offensive linemen's helmets. I mean, the vast majority of these injuries come from inside the pocket. And even though Young is going to have some ability to get out on the edge and make some plays out on the edge, he makes his money playing from inside the pocket. And teams know this. They're not stupid. And I think he's very likely to be a good quarterback in this league. But the injury concerns are very real, and the way he plays his game is going to intensify those concerns. There's just no way around it.
Yeah, because those mobile quarterbacks, when they get outside, they can slide, they can run out of bounds. They're not touchable. You're absolutely right. Like there's rules in the NFL. You can't hit a quarterback from the knees down or from the neck up. But when there's that much traffic, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
When these guys are this big, this strong, this fast, those offensive linemen are back on their heels, falling back into you. You're twisting ankles. You're getting ankle sprains. You're getting your knee buckled. I mean, wasn't it Mac Jones that had his ankle and was like screaming in pain on the field?
Yeah, he struggled with ankle injuries all last year.
And we saw broken hands. We saw high ankle sprains. We saw hyperextended knees. He's not going to play at 204 pounds. I just don't think his frame is going to support that. And he's not going to be loaded up on water and milk and pasta before each game.
I think by the time he plays his rookie year, after it gets done, or by the time he goes into his rookie year and starts week 1, by the time he gets through training camp and those 2-a-days, I would be hard pressed to see him weighing more than 190. I've watched him play for 2 years. I won money on him when he won the Heisman, so I thank you for that. But I watched him play, and his playing weight looked like he was in the high 170s when he was playing in Alabama. Now he's put on some weight certainly over the last year and a half since he won that Heisman, and he'll go into the NFL a little bit bigger than he was. But make no mistake, adding 25 pounds of good football weight on a 5'10" frame as a quarterback, that's a lot.
Well, and you start bulking up like that, is it going to change your throwing motion?
Well, I mean,
you got all kinds of different things. He is so used to playing efficiently at his size. If you change that size, will he be as efficient?
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see any outcome where he plays at that size. It's just not. Like we were talking earlier, it's just water and pasta. The things that truly interest me in this draft are farther down the board, to be honest with you. And we talked a little bit off air about it. Guys like Stetson Bennett. Like, no, he's not going to be a first-round quarterback. He's probably not going to be a second-round quarterback. But he's a guy that has some of those intangibles. He's able to get outside the pocket and run. He's not a big guy like Bryce Young is. But what he is he's a proven winner, which is gonna attract people. He's won 2 consecutive national titles. He's had some issues with the law, so that'll certainly affect his draft status. And again, innocent until proven guilty. But at the end of the day, he's a very compelling case. He might go undrafted. Right now, the betting markets have him at plus 150 to go undrafted. I could see him going anywhere from round 4 to undrafted. Who knows? You've also got guys like Max Duggan. He's a really compelling guy out of TCU. He's a hard-nosed, old-style guy. Mm-hmm. I could see him sticking in the league for 10 years, being a backup quarterback and just being a really solid guy. I mean, Chase Daniels made a lot of money playing for the Bears and other organizations, being a backup quarterback.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of money to be made there.
Josh McDaniel, another one that did the same thing, right?
There's an endless number of them. Some guys that kind of intrigue me on down the board too. Jaron Hall out of BYU. Going into this year, there was a lot of buzz around him that he could be the first overall pick. I know I put a little bit of money on him in the preseason. He's got some of the tools. He wasn't as productive as he would have been. He certainly didn't win games like you'd expect a first round or a first overall pick to. But he's a guy that could be kind of in that mid round area that could make somebody's roster. And maybe he's a Kirk Cousins one day where he eventually finds a place. He maybe starts up as somebody's backup and then eventually over time takes somebody's spot. Some guys with some skills that could translate. Dorian Thompson-Robinson out of UCLA. He's going to be a guy that's going to jump off the screen when you watch him play. He's electric. But he's a small frame guy. But like I said, he's an electric guy. Malik Cunningham out of Louisville. He's big, very big. He's mobile. He's got a really strong arm. He struggles with accuracy. But I kind of see him in a similar way that I view Anthony Richardson. There's a lot of similarities in their game. A lot of similarities. I wouldn't, to be honest with you, I wouldn't at all be surprised to see them have similar career paths in similar situations. Tanner McKee might be your 5th quarterback off the board out of Stanford.
He's out of Stanford. Yep, that's what I was going to ask.
He might be the 5th quarterback off the board before Hooker and even before the other quarterback.
We have Levis. We've got Hooker
before O'Connell.
Okay.
Tanner McKee very well might be the 5th quarterback taken. He's another guy that I actually put some money on in the collegiate preseason to be the first overall pick because he's got some of those tools that translate. Now, he didn't have the production, and Stanford certainly wasn't very good, and that's why David Shaw is no longer there. But there's tools there to work with. There's a lot of intriguing options down the board, but other than Bryce Young, there's no surefire thing in here. There's some upside. There's some high floors like C.J. Stroud. Maybe Hendon Hooker's in that class.
It would be really interesting to see where Hendon Hooker would be if he didn't have his ACL tear.
I think he would be your 3rd quarterback, maybe your 2nd quarterback taken off the board. If he was 22 or 23 instead of 25 and didn't have that injury, I believe he'd be the 2nd quarterback off the board.
Yeah, he had sorry YouTube, heck of a year last year for Tennessee. Levis, I am not sold on him. I know he had a great year, not this past year, but the year before. This year we talked, he lost weapons, and I get that, but he just, I don't know. He was inconsistent. I didn't really feel like he elevated the wide receiver or tight end groups there at Kentucky. So, I mean, everybody talks about his cannon of an arm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. I worry about the accuracy issue with him. Mm-hmm. In the NFL especially. Yeah. So, I don't know. Like, the one thing that's going to save Bryce Young, at least, he was accurate in the SEC. So, it's not like he hasn't had big offensive linemen, big defensive linemen in front of him, and he was still accurate. That's going to save him. Mm-hmm. And Levis plays in the SEC too, but when he lost those great weapons, who did he elevate afterwards?
Yeah, we talked a little bit off camera about Wan'Dale Robinson, and what's important to remember is Wan'Dale was really good with the Giants. So Levis kind of lost his only option. It's still the University of Kentucky. It's still the SEC. So, and they still won a fair number. I think they won 8 games this year. They made it to a bowl game again. They've had a lot of recent success here for the standards that Kentucky football's had. So I don't want to take that away from him. But he did lose his best weapon. People might remember when Josh Allen played at Wyoming, his junior year, he had a lot of really nice weapons. Some of them made it to the NFL. In his senior year, he really struggled. Levis has got along with some of his tools and his traits, there's a lot of similarities here. I mean, it wouldn't be at all surprising you tell me in 5 years he's the best quarterback coming out of this class. It wouldn't at all surprise me if you told me he was out of the league.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he definitely doesn't lack for confidence. But let's transition, because I want to talk about running backs with you, too.
Mm-hmm.
This is a fantasy football show, so we want to make sure that we're hitting on all these guys. So, running backs. I want to start with that over-under again.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I said this one is something a little interesting. And the number is going to seem low, but there's a reason for it. This is the NFL. This is the draft. This is first round only.
Mm-hmm.
I set the over-under on running backs at 1.5. And I did that for a very interesting reason. I think if one's going to go, I think we know who it's going to be.
Yeah.
But there's another one out there that's interesting too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Alabama running back. We talked a little bit about in the first segment. Jahmyr Gibbs is a guy that is not going to get a lot of the muster coming up through the draft process. He was a guy that played at Georgia Tech for 3 years. Maybe it was 2 years. But he played at Georgia Tech. He transferred to Alabama, played at Alabama for 1 year, struggled with some injuries a little bit at Alabama, played behind Bryce Young. And they didn't really have a lot of great receiving weapons, so their offense wasn't great by the Alabama historical trends that we've seen. But make no mistake, Jahmyr Gibbs, whether it's fantasy purposes or whether it's, in this case, the over-under purposes, Jahmyr Gibbs very well could be a first-round pick. He could be a very valuable player in fantasy for years to come. He's going to catch the ball out of the backfield. He'll get you some touchdowns. He's going to be able to run between the tackles, even though he's a small guy. He's 5'11", 200 pounds. He's got enough thickness to him that he can work between the tackles. He can get out on the edge. Obviously, Nick Saban trusted him to run blocks, so that should translate to the NFL because Nick Saban does not put up with running backs that don't have the full capacity of skills in order for them to play down in and down out. If I were to take this, given some of the depth of the draft, once you get past Gibbs, there's kind of a drop-off. Mm-hmm. You've got the kid out of Texas A&M, Devin Achiane. Sorry, I probably mispronounced your name. If you're listening, I apologize. I doubt it, but it's possible.
We know you're watching.
If you've seen some of the combine footage, I'm sure he ran an absolutely electric 40-yard dash. Probably probably sub 4.3. There were people that were talking that he might break the John Ross's 4.22 40-yard dash time. I think it's probably unlikely, but the idea of him running a 4.3 is almost guaranteed at this point. He's a 100-meter track star. He competed for he competed in some of the Olympic trials for Texas A&M, who historically has a great track team. If I were to take the over/under at 1.5, I would probably take an over because I think some of the gap after Gibbs, whether it's the kid from Texas A&M or Zach Charbonnet from UCLA or Zach Evans, some of those guys you're going to be able to get in the third round. So there's kind of a drop-off there. And if you need a back, whether you're Philadelphia, maybe you're Buffalo, maybe you're some of these other teams that are having to make decisions, maybe you're like Dallas. Maybe Dallas is going to have to be, a team. Maybe they move on from Zeke. It's hard to know. They obviously have options with Tony Pollard there, but is he an every down back? I don't know. I think it's more likely that Gibbs goes in the first round too, which is kind of a galling idea. 2 running backs going in the first round. That's in the modern NFL. It's almost unheard of.
Yeah, but talking about positions in need, though, there are some teams that I feel like they're only that one piece away. Buffalo is one that you said. Philly, they've got cap space issues. Miles Sanders is almost certainly gone. So yeah, I mean, I could see it. The kid out of Texas A&M, he might be lightning fast, but he's 5'9", 185 pounds.
Yeah.
He's gonna. You had mentioned a good comp for him is Darren Sproles.
Yeah.
He's going to be a very good complementary piece, but he's not a guy that you're going to be able to rely on.
No, he's a guy that will probably make his money on special teams. He'll probably have a third down package. He'll be somebody's rotational, change of pace back, and he might be very good at that. I mean, he very well could be. We just don't see a lot of consistent 1 through 3 down running backs who are burners. We just don't see them. They don't hold up.
Right. I think he would project very well as a good third down back and maybe a special teamer.
Yeah.
To me, that's what he is. And the other running backs, we're running low on time, so we're going to transition to wide receiver here pretty quick. But the other running backs, they just don't have that 3 down back, that ability to run and catch and block. You
might see that with Evans a little bit.
He's the one out of Ole Miss, right?
He's 6 foot 215 pounds. He might. It's unlikely. The system out of Ole Miss was a very run and gun style system. They don't throw a lot to the running back, so it's hard to know exactly how much tape he's got out there. Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA is really a first and second down back. At 220 pounds and 6'1", you're just not going to see a lot of running backs that size be 3 down backs in the modern NFL.
I'm going to check out here and see if those 40 times came in for that running back. But I'm not seeing them yet. So, all right, transitioning over to wide receiver. You ready?
Yep.
All right, I've got your over-under at wide receiver for the first round.
Mm-hmm.
I've got it set at 3.5.
Oh, 3.5 is the wrong number. I'd bet that over. I might take over 4.5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you've got a lot of guys.
Very strong.
Quentin Johnson is a first-round pick. Jordan Addison is a first-round pick.
Okay.
Jackson Smith-Njigba, likely a first-round pick.
Okay, so there's 3.
2 guys that you're going to see a lot of people talk about in the next couple of months are Zay Flowers and Jalen Hyatt. Hyatt's starting to get some pub now just because of some of his measurables. He's a blazer. He's very fast. He played in a Tennessee system where there was no shortage of opportunity. And Zay Flowers is a guy whose measurables are also crazy. He's built similarly to a guy like Brandon Cooks. He's very small. But if you look at some of his combine stuff, the guy's jacked. For a little guy, he's jacked. To me, he kind of reminded me a little bit of a smaller build version of Deebo Samuel. He's going to be able to bounce off some people. He's very fast. He's going to be able to work out in open space. And there's a reason why he's shooting up draft boards. Not long ago, he was 20-1 to be the first wide receiver taken. Now it's 5-6 to 1 that he's the first receiver taken. So it's the wide receiver market, especially in that first round, so much of it is based on team need and fit and where these guys are at in terms of their upside. So much of this is team fit, and all of these guys have incredibly different skills. Quentin Johnson is really the only guy that is a package where he's kind of a do-it-all. Jackson Smith-Njigba, he's a guy that's a little bit of a possession guy. He's got some speed, but not a bunch. But he's got a small frame, struggles with injury concerns. Jordan Addison is a possession guy, but he's got a small build. He's only 5'11", 173 pounds. He produced at Pittsburgh. When he went to USC, produced there too. But is he going to be able to hold up with that frame? Especially if he plays on the outside? I don't know. Maybe. We already talked about Zay Flowers, Jalen Hyatt. A lot of these guys are small guys. Mm-hmm. A lot of these guys are 170, 180 pound wide receivers. I remember growing up being a Colts fan, Marvin Harrison was only $180, and he looks so small. But I mean, in today's NFL, he's increasingly becoming what would have been the standard bearer because a lot of these guys are very small. Johnson really is kind of an outlier in all of that.
Yep. All right, so I gave you a layup on that one.
Yeah.
All right,
I do want to say one guy I want people to keep an eye on, Josh Downs.
Okay, he's out of North Carolina.
Yeah, Josh Downs, in Sam Howell's last year before he was drafted by the Commanders, was a guy that was on everyone's radar. You had the game playing for him. He was just as electric as Hyatt was, or Zay Flowers is. He's a guy that jumps off the screen. In Drake May's first year after Howell left, he struggled a little bit. He struggled with some injury concerns. The North Carolina offense kind of came on late in the year. They were very proficient. Downs wasn't as productive as he would have liked to have been. But he's a guy that has the tools. If he finds his way into the right system, can be a dynamic playmaker. He's somebody that is likely to go in the mid-second round maybe somewhere in that second round somewhere. It'll depend on team need and fit. But with the depth at wide receiver in this class, I mean, you could see 9-10 guys go in the first 3 rounds, and that's not uncommon. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see where he goes, but he's got upside in that second round. You could see him be a Pro Bowler in 5 years. Wouldn't it all surprise me?
Okay. All right, so I gave you a bit of a layup there.
Yeah.
We're going to transition to tight end. All right. Now, I'm not doubting the talent at tight end, but like you and I were talking earlier, sometimes too much talent at a position tends to downgrade these guys a little bit, not because they don't deserve to be there, but because you don't need to draft them as early.
Yeah, there are... Oh, did you have something more to add on to that?
1.5.
1.5. Ooh, that one is a tough one.
Ha! So I gave him a layup on the wide receiver, so I had to make it a little bit tougher here at tight end.
I'll walk through my process. Michael Mayer is going to be a first-round talent. He's a possession tight end. You're not going to see him. He's not going to be 6'6", 6'7". He's 6'4.5". When he gets out there on the field, he's not going to overwhelm you with his size. But he's as savvy a tight end as you will see. His ability to kind of read the field is a lot like Travis Kelce's. He's just got those intangibles and those instincts to be able to find the open space, work his body into windows that allow his quarterback to find them. And those skills are very difficult to find in any pass catcher, let alone a tight end. So he's going to be a first-round pick. He's been slotted in as a first-round pick basically since his freshman year coming out of Notre Dame. Being a Notre Dame fan myself, I knew about Michael Mayer when he was a junior in high school. This guy he's a first-round pick. The question is what are you going to do about after that? You really have 3 guys. Dalton Kincaid out of Utah, Luke Musgrave out of Oregon State, and Darnell Washington out of Georgia. All 3 of those guys, if they were the lone guy in a thin tight end class, could easily be a first-round pick. But the problem is, and as Dan highlighted, sometimes having this much depth at tight end can be a problem. You're likely going to see 5 guys in the first 75, 80 picks go at tight end. That is an absurd amount of depth at tight end, especially when 4 of those guys have grades on them in the mid-40s and below. So when you combine that with other positional strengths like the class at edge, you're likely to see some of those guys kind of fall. I mean, there's no shortage of need at tight end. I mean, if you're a fantasy player, you obviously know about the thin nature of the tight end.
Positional premium.
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing to find. But if you're team building and you're not concerned with fantasy, you're going to see some of these guys might fall, and their talent won't warrant it. It's just there's just so much value to be had. Why take one at 20 or 21 or 22 or 25 when I can get a guy at similar? Maybe I grab him at 40, maybe at 45. So it's just I would take under 1.5, and it would depend on where the juice was at. You know, I'd probably want some plus money on that, but I wouldn't get a lot because this class you're likely to see some guys fall. And one guy, I just as a player I'd like to highlight, obviously Michael Mayer, I'm a big Notre Dame fan, but Darnell Washington out of Georgia, he wasn't even the first tight end on his own positional depth chart at Georgia. It's Brock Bowers. The guy slated to go in the first 45 picks. Imagine that. He didn't even start on his own team. And he's going to go in the first half of the first 2 rounds. It's just ludicrous. The guy is absolutely enormous. He's 6'6.5", 264 pounds. And I think he's going to be a great player in the NFL. I really do. Put him on a pro-style team where he's going to be able to work off the line of scrimmage. He can get out in space, play in as a flex tight end out on the edge. He can do it all, and I believe when he's able to show it, when he makes his way onto an NFL roster, well, eventually he'll be the starter, which is a crazy idea that he couldn't even be the starter at Georgia. When he gets an opportunity, I believe he'll showcase that.
Absolutely. All right, we're getting low on time, and I know these aren't fantasy positions, but I got to ask, just because there's been so much intrigue. All right, so we're just going to look at defensive linemen as a whole. Okay? Defensive linemen as a whole. Every year these guys get taken. Mm-hmm. There's some guys that are just shockingly skyrocketing. Mm-hmm. There's guys that have always been at the top. There's one guy at the top that might be tumbling, Jalen Carter, right? Mm-hmm. All right, I've set the over/under first round. This should be a layup too, 7.5.
I think it's under as well.
Okay.
There's some positions in this draft, like at corner, very thin. On the defensive line and in the edge, even though Carter's draft stock might fall a little bit, Anderson is still going to be a first-round pick. Carter's almost certainly going to be a first-round pick. Tyree Wilson might be the most talented player in this draft that very few people know about. If you're in NFL circles, you know who the guy is, though. The average fan, most people never heard of the guy. But production, when he was at Texas Tech, he was putting up numbers. He was just playing out in the Big 12 where nobody heard about him because Texas Tech is awful. So he's good. The question is going to be around the two Clemson defensive linemen, Miles Murphy and Brian Brees. Brees has been a guy that had some early top 5 buzz going into the year, had a very disappointing year as a junior. He might be a guy that falls all the way out. He's kind of a tweener. You know, is he a D tackle? Is he a 3-4 defensive end? So it's kind of hard to know where he falls in that. I think, me personally, I think he's probably a 3 technique, but he could also be a 3-4 end. I don't know how that works out for him. I've heard some stuff recently that he's kind of fallen down draft boards. That might be smoke and mirrors. That might be somebody trying to suppress draft value in the 15s or the 20s. That's trying to to scoop some value on a guy that kind of had a tough year, because Clemson did have a tough year. They did. Not defensively, offensively, but all things considered, they had a tough year. Lucas Van Ness is a guy not a lot of people heard of, but Iowa for years has put out good defensive linemen. They traditionally are 4-3 defensive linemen. Very good run stoppers. Van Ness is no different. The guy that's shooting up boards now is Nolan Smith. Yesterday he ran a 4.440. Was absolutely blazing. You might have saw the videos of the Georgia combine party that they had at the University of Georgia. Was absolutely losing their minds. He's a guy that could very easily shoot up draft boards. Might be all smoke and mirrors, but it's hard to know right now. And then a guy you actually talked about early, Kalijah Cansey. He's a guy that's probably a 3 technique. There's a lot of people who've compared him to Aaron Donald. He's got the roots at Pittsburgh like Donald did. He's only 6'1", 281 pounds, so he's got a small frame, but he's explosive. You look at his combine numbers. He's a guy that could creep up. Keon White out of Georgia Tech. He's a twitchy 6'5", 285 pounder. He's a fit guy, so it's hard to know. I think you're likely to see under because there's just so much depth here that I can grab a guy in the 40s that should be in the 20s because positions like quarterback are going to get pushed up. Positions like offensive line, not a ton of depth there. They're going to get pushed up. Positions like cornerback, not a lot of depth there. It's going to get pushed up. If you've got a need here, you got to take him because if you're going to wait to the 2nd or 3rd round, you're going to be left with crumbs.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and just remember, though, no Mike Mayock in this draft this year, so might have a little... I'm just kidding. All right, so what I'm going to do here for the last group is I'm going to lump the corners and safeties together, so just secondary, right? Because, you know, a lot of these guys in college, they may play cornerback, but they're more of a fit as a safety or vice versa once they get to the pros. All right, 7.5.
I kind of laid out the theory a little bit previously in the edge.
Yep.
I think it's going to go over, and it's not because of skill talent. I think this is a defensive back class that is likely going to be a little thin. I kind of like Cam Smith. There's some buzz around him here recently. Joey Porter, that name might sound familiar for a reason. Mm-hmm. He's a corner, unlike his father, who was a linebacker, played for Pittsburgh. You might have heard of him. He's kind of shooting up draft boards here recently. A guy that's kind of falling a little bit, Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. He had some early buzz. Still expected to be the first corner off the board. But this class is kind of in flex, and that's typically the way these things are. So much of this is team fit. If you're running a cover 2 system like the Bears do or some of those old Colts teams used to, you're not going to draft a box safety. So a lot of this is team need. And like you were talking about with Mayock, we're not likely to see a player that's a 3rd round pick taken in the 20s. I'm going to miss Mayock. Made for good betting opportunities.
I was going to say, good betting opportunities, at least some entertainment in the second
Definitely
half.
some entertainment.
There you go.
But yeah, I would say over, and lack of talent is definitely why.
I wouldn't be surprised to see Banks out of Maryland rise too. He was really fast in the 40. So it's crazy how much they value speed. But,
yeah, they had a couple of guys.
Hands.
They had 2 corners. Both our corners ran absurdly fast times out of Maryland. Maybe it's something in that swampy water down there. I don't know.
Could be.
But yeah, they definitely jumped off the page this week during the combine. But it'll be an interesting class. I mean, it really is. There inevitably will be some guys in that 2nd and 3rd round that end up popping that nobody's ever heard of. But you end up finding really nice players. And I remind people, Jair Alexander, who's a great corner, he was a 20-something. There's a lot of really nice corners out there that are 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s in terms of the picks that you can find nice value and not necessarily have to be a top 10 pick. I mean, look at Okuda. Okuda, I think, was taken 6th overall.
Yep.
He's been as average as average gets.
Right. He's there. He starts, but is he great?
No, he's
really.
not. Very mediocre.
Yep. All right, so we are running low on time. I'm going to ask you a kind of a final question, but I'm going to give you an out.
Okay.
All right. So we've kind of wrapped up what I wanted to cover. Is there any other gambling lines, betting lines that we need to know about? Any other predictions you want to make? Anything else that you think is going to pop out? Or you want to save those until we get more information?
Well, as somebody who likes to bet, more information is always preferred. 2 things that, from a gambling perspective, especially here in the next couple of days, I don't know, when is the audience going to get this video?
This will probably come out on Monday, roughly the 6th, or maybe Tuesday the 7th.
Okay, so maybe this should be timely. Something that I'm looking forward to personally and I've already bet this, and hopefully there's still some value for those of you that are interested. Jalen Carter, first defensive player drafted. I know prior to the news coming out, he was a -110 favorite over Will Anderson, who was, I believe, in the plus 200 range. Tyree Wilson was roughly plus 600 or so. He's gotten some value now because of the news that come out. That news was always going to come out. And NFL teams, to be quite frank, these guys hire investigators. Mm-hmm. These people know the news, but unless it's something that's new news that they don't know about, these guys know about it. This happened a year ago. If Jalen Carter is on your big board and you're theoretically going to take a look at drafting this guy, you knew about this. Mm-hmm. You've hired an investigator. You've looked into this. You've talked about it. You talked to the people around the situation. So this is something that they knew about, and so I took Jalen Carter at plus 475 to be the first defensive player drafted. Anything over 4-1, I think, has value. Me personally, I think Will Anderson is going to be a good defensive edge rusher. But I think that he benefited a lot from being a good player or a great player amongst a lot of other good players. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard to double team an Alabama player because the guy that's rushing opposite of him is likely going to be a first round pick as well.
Yep.
So
every year,
Jalen Carter being on the inside fared similarly, except he put up the production. Will Anderson did not produce in his second year as a junior that he didn't as he did as a sophomore, where he put up 13 sacks. So I think Jalen Carter's got very real value, and now's probably the time to buy because we're only going to learn more about this situation. And again, it's misdemeanors. And if the guy is as talented as people is and has said that he is, they'll find a reason to draft him. If they believe that he's more talented than Anderson and it's definitive, they'll take him. The question I have is Tyree Wilson. The value's kind of been sucked out of that due to the Carter news. So there's not real value to be had there now. But somebody might fall in love with Tyree Wilson. I remind people, just something to remember. Last year there was a player that was 100-1 to go first overall, 2 weeks before the draft, who was then drafted first overall. And that was Trayvon Walker, and he was expected to go in the 10 range, and then Jacksonville fell in love with the guy because he was toolsy and he had the traits. And who knows? Maybe the Bears are just maybe they fall in love with Carter's traits, and they stick and pick. The last thing I want to talk about is first quarterback to be drafted. Currently, Bryce Young is sitting in the minus 200 range. These markets, this might be the best time to get this price because of the Anthony Richardson hype. I haven't looked at the markets here today since Richardson posted his numbers, but prior to getting on here, Bryce Young was minus 190-200. I would imagine that number is likely going to shorten to around 150, 160 because people are going to flood the market with Richardson money. If you can get in the 175-ish range, there's probably value there. Bryce Young is almost certainly going to be your first pick. His floor is just simply too high, and if you've got to take a quarterback, I would recommend first quarterback taking Bryce Young at anything better than minus 175.
Excellent advice. All right, we're going to wrap this episode up, but there is something I want you to do. Go down to the comment section, let us know if you want to join the mock draft challenge. Also go down, put your over-unders and why. Now, I did something on purpose. So this year there's only 31 first-round picks because Miami lost theirs. Mm-hmm. If you add up my over-unders, it does not add up to 31 picks. I left some layups up there. This is going to tighten up, but at the same time, it's March 4th. The Combine's still going on. We haven't had pro days. A lot of new information is going to be coming in over time, but we're going to be increasing these. We're going to make it tighter. By the end of these videos that Patrick and I do, we're going to get this down to 31 picks. Over under set right at 30 or 31. We're going to make you make some choices. Mm-hmm. We want you to participate. You know, Patrick and I have a blast doing this, but half the fun is getting you involved too. So make sure you're going down to that comment section. Make sure you're putting your picks in. Make sure you're following these additional videos that are going to be coming out over the next few weeks as we lead up to the draft. Participate. Be a part of this. Don't forget to subscribe. Hit the little bell icon so that every time Patrick and I do one of these videos, you see these. Play along. Be a part of the journey. Hit the like button on this. And until next time, see ya.